We will begin so that we don't waste everyone's time. So I'd like to take the opportunity to say good afternoon to everyone and a very warm welcome. Before anything else, I just want to give thanks to Learning Planet for hosting the session and for creating the space for conversations like this to take place as part of a global dialogue on learning and transformation. Thank you to everyone for joining, taking time out of your day and being a part of this discussion. We look forward to obviously presenting all the speakers, sharing their insights, and then creating a dialogue of engagement with everyone. Without further ado, my name is Daniel Duruti de Grandpré. I am a program associate at the Club of Rome, and I'll be co-moderating today's session together with my partner colleagues Mario Salomone and Mario Claudio Cusomano. Today's webinar is the state of educational systems, cultural challenges of our time. It is part of the No Limits to Hope, Transforming Learning for Better Future, a research and publication initiative led by the Club of Rome, the Fifth Element, and the WEEC Network. Mario will give a bit of a better background of this next. But to lay out the path for this session, today's conversation is designed as a kind of fireside plenary style discussion rather than a presentation-based webinar. We'll move through guided questions, open dialogue, and then audience engagements. I'll now pass over to Mario, the Secretary General of the WEEC Network, who will briefly outline the No Limits to Hope initiative and help contextually ground the conversation we're about to have. Over to you, Mario.
Mario, you're muted.
Apologies. Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning. It depends. Thanks a lot for attending this webinar, and many thanks to the panelists. Welcome. My thanks to the Club of Rome, to the Fifth Element for promoting the debate in collaboration with the worldwide environmental education community on key point proposed by our joint initiative, No Limits to Hope. The initiative was launched at the beginning of 2024 at 12th World Congress on Environmental Education in Abu Dhabi. The final report will be presented next September at the 13th Congress in Perth, Australia. The report will summarize a couple of years of meetings and contribution to the online forum. I invite all attendees of this seminar to contribute to the forum, of course. And two other pillars will be, first, a book we are finalizing with 30 or more chapters written by educators from all over the world. Second, a special issue of the International Scientific Journal, Culture or Sustainability. We are inspired by a seminar report to the Club of Rome, No Limits to Learn. It was the seventh long series of crucial studies on what the founder of Club of Rome, Aurelio Peccei, named the World Problematique. It was the report published in 1979 was the outcome of research and reflection of hundreds of people from what at the time were the first, second, and third war. The No Limits to Learn report contributed to fostering the debate on interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity. It denounced the obstacles to learning, including a conservative role assigned to the educational system, military expenditures, and the reductionist anthropocentric paradigm. The report called for transformative learning. We, Aurelio Peccei said, must engage and act to bridge the human gap between our knowledge, our capabilities, our awareness, and the increasingly rapidly rising problems we created through our trust in technology and human power on nature. So we must understand what is necessary to learn and learn it. 47 years later, the message of the report is more valid than ever, and we need as well to challenge questions and exploring the key points of an era of further huge acceleration, radical change, new scenarios of the international relationship, the menaces of war, both interstate and intrastate, both deadly and commercial, testify to the interconnections between fossil fuel, the struggle for natural resources such as the critical minerals and water, the environment, freedom, and democracy. Growing inequalities at the level never seen before, a polycrisis, climatic, political, ecological, the opportunities, but also the problems created by the exponential evolution of informatics 70 years after the first use of the terminal artificial intelligence. The failure of many goals of the Agenda 2030, as witnessed last year by the UN Annual Report 2025, and the list could sadly continue. We educators shall find the answers to the question posed above. There is also another question people could pose. Why is an environmental worldwide network of academics, teachers, non-formal educators, activists, and the public officers involved in initiatives facing the state, the mission, and the ethics of the education and learning today? I have the answer to the last question. Quoting my friend Derrida, any education is an education, environmental education. War and energy, social environmental justice, biodiversity, and economics, health and wealth are all phases of our way of being in the world in a reciprocal reliance between humanity and nature as all citizens of a community of destiny and of a common home. Good webinar.
Thank you so much, Mario. Thank you for setting the scene and giving the historical background of No Limits to Hope. I'm going to take the opportunity to briefly introduce our speakers before I hand over to Mario Claudio, who will be facilitating the dialogue. And first, we'll start off with John Gilmore. John joins us from South Africa. He is an educator and social entrepreneur, founder of Leap Science and Math Schools and the Leap Institute. John brings deep grassroots experience in humanizing education and exploring how learning can move beyond inherited colonial models towards cultures of peace, justice, and hope. We also have Lily Chow. Lily works with Save the Children International and joins us from the UK. Her work focuses on sustainable development, policy, and children-centered approaches to the SDGs. Lily brings global evidence and insights from the reports Racing Against Time, helping us understand where we are now and what this means for children's futures. We also have Jack Davies, but unfortunately, he isn't able to be with us today due to a family medical situation. We're very grateful for his engagement in preparing for the session and are saddened by the fact that he won't be able to contribute. We wish him the warmest wishes for him and his family. Additional to this, we will have a pre-recorded contribution. This will come from Lucy Sauvé. Lucy joins us via a recorded contribution from Canada. She is a professor at the University of Quebec in Montreal and a leading voice in environmental education and eco-citizenship. Her contribution invites us to reflect on how education can move beyond awareness towards civic agency and eco-social transformation. I'd now like to hand over to Maria Claudia, who will take us through our fireside discussion.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, our guests, for joining this webinar. Thank you to all attendees. I will start the question directly to John Gilmore. John, your work is deeply grounded in the grassroots practice and lived experience with the communities. Well, from where you stand today, how is hope? It has always been cultivated or challenged with the educational system at the grassroots level? And what does this tell us about the possibilities for transforming education behind inherent colonial models? Thank you, John. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria Claudia and Daniel and colleagues across Learning Planet, UNESCO, Fifth Element of the Club of Rome, and the WEEC Network. I am speaking from the underside of the system, from classrooms and communities where education is not a theory. It's a daily negotiation with hunger, with fear, with hope, with dignity and power. And I want to start with a disruptive statement to say, we will not transform education by improving a paradigm that was designed to rank human beings. We will not get free by perfecting the machinery of compliance. We do need a different operating system. And the operating system has to be governed by the commitment that each of us makes, as Pope Francis has called us to do, to embrace hope and to live hope and to choose hope. Hope is not a mood. It is a disciplined relational practice that will produce agency, will produce a strong sense of belonging, and must produce action. So we are simply not going to transform the opportunities for young people in living on the margins in the world by improving a paradigm that is broken. Now, how is hope going to be cultivated or challenged at grassroots level is an obvious question, and it's the question I've been living in my life for the last 30 years. And where I stand, I'd like to start by saying hope is challenged in three brutal ways in the current system. Hope is crushed by deficit storytelling. We live in Africa in deficit storytelling, which ultimately is experienced by a child as you are not enough. Deficit language claims to be neutral, but it is not. It's a form of violence. It names people by what they don't have, and it trains them to shrink themselves. And we know the proverb from Africa that says, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. And so Education for Hope insists the lion must write. Hope is also crushed when education is set up as a factory for obedience, when schools reward compliance more than curiosity, silence more than voice, and fear more than freedom. We do not educate, we domesticate. And this is the story colonial Africa. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. If belonging is missing, we will keep producing rage, withdrawal, despair, and we will call it discipline problems. The third element of the crushing of hope is when we pretend that the crisis is technical. We keep saying better curriculum, better tests, better devices. But there is a deeper wound, a cultural and human injury a widening gap that Mario referred to. And it's a gap between what we know and how we live. Now, in Africa, we have the gift of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is the basis of African philosophy, which really summarizes it is being human in relation to others. So how is hope going to be cultivated? Hope is cultivated when we do one thing consistently. We build agency, belonging, and meaning into the everyday experience of learning. We can't treat children as passengers. They are participants. When they teach each other, build together, solve real problems, speak, lead, create, when they're invited to become a community, and when the community becomes the curriculum. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together." It's not a soft idea, it's a design principle. And I want to just close my response to say, we use a single compass to keep hope real. And I've called it the hope to the power of 5. We've got to work with the heart. Does the work we do grow compassion and dignity? We have to work with the power of the head. Does it grow critical thinking and truth? We've got to work with the power of the hands. Does it become action, contribution, capability? Work with the power of heritage. Do we ground our understanding of each other in the context of our roots? And the 5th power is the power of humanity. Does the work we do deepen solidarity? So for me, this is where we need to go in this conversation around how do we cultivate hope. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your work. It really engaged in very strong words. So thank you for sharing with us. And now we will have time for discussing about your reflection. But now I want to move to Lilay because your recent work on Races Against Time that we have authored for the Save the Children offer a new analysis of where the world stands in relation to the SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, particularly from the perspective of the Global South and perspective of the children. I would like to ask you, Lily, where we are now, which progress has been made, and we perhaps take a step back in terms of human rights and SDG from the point of view of children and the youth. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. And I would extend my appreciation to Learning Planet for inviting me today. So just to give a bit of context, this report was written in the lead up to the SDG Summit, which, as you know, was held in New York in 2024 at the margins of the UN General Assembly. To give a bit of background, in 2015, world leaders from all over the world signed what has been to date the most comprehensive framework, which is the 2030 Agenda and the corresponding Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which were supposed to guide all of us toward a more prosperous, more sustainable and fairer future. So we wanted to take a have a look at where we were, and the picture is grim. Currently, only about 17% of the SDG targets are making the progress needed to reach the 2030 deadline. Only moderate or marginal progress is being made against nearly half of the SDG targets, which is far from enough to reach the targets in time. Progress on 18% of them is stagnating, and 17% are actually regressing, with rates of progress slower than they were at the 2015 starting point. I'm going to look specifically now at this analysis which we've done. To look at this, we've looked at sort of 90 child-relevant indicators across all 17 SDGs. And it also takes into account some important interlinkages between the different policy areas. Some of the largest gaps appear in hunger and nutrition, SDG 2, education, which is SDG 4, affordable and clean energy, which is SDG 7, industry, innovation, infrastructure, SDG 9, and life on land. These gaps, however, vary significantly, and this is an important point, between not just income groups, but also regions. The widest gaps are found in sub-Saharan Africa, followed by South Asia and the Middle East and North Africa. But I think it's important to underscore that the SDGs remain unfulfilled everywhere, including in high-income countries such as the UK. When we look, and I think I'll take some time to just kind of say one of the central tenets of the 2030 agenda was this principle that the SDGs needed to be met by all countries everywhere. It was a universal framework, and a central principle of that was this promise to leave no one behind. And so when we look at this, progress matters, right, and the size of the gaps. I think what we are seeing, at least at Save the Children, is that the poorest children continue to make the are being continuous pushed behind, and they're making the least progress, this is why it's important to really disaggregate the data. For instance, girls growing up in the poorest 20% of households are twice as likely to marry before the age of 18 than girls from the richest 20%. Let's take a look in more detail about data around SDG 4, which is education. So this shows that that progress has been made. So since 2015, since the signing of the 2030 Agenda, 110 million more children and youth have entered school. Global completion rates in 2024 reached 88% for primary, which is quite positive, 78% for lower secondary, and up to 60% for upper secondary education. Youth literacy rose globally from 91% in 2014 to 93% in 2024. And over half of youth aged between 15 and 24 participated in educational training in 2024, up more than 10 percentage points since 2000. On the other hand, 272 million children and youth remain out of school in 2023. In 2019, only 58% of primary school students reached minimum proficiency in reading, and just 44% did so in mathematics. 36% of school-aged children and youth are out of school in low-income countries compared to 3% in high-income countries. And over 20% of primary schools lack electricity, water, sanitation. 2/3 of primary schools in lower-income countries lack digital tools at all. When we did this report, there were two parts. One was the side of the data side of it, looking at the analysis, looking where the gaps are. The other side was the children's scorecard. So we teamed up with about 500 children from around the world, from 5 different countries, to ask them where they feel progress is being made. And what you get overwhelmingly across these reports is this desire by children that they want to learn, they want to be in classrooms, this strong desire that education is the most important thing. We also saw that in COVID, the number one thing that children wanted was to go back to school. So I guess in closing, I would say we are not where we want to be, but so far we have seen that progress is possible, and it's now time for us to get serious about investing in children and future generations.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you for your analysis. Really very interesting. And I want to just make a short recap of the themes that has been arise in this first round of discussion. So I want to rename some some words that John Gilmore has been mentioned, such as anger, poverty, dignity, but also hope, violence, the idea of communities. And also I want to introduce, to take note of other names that Lily has been mentioned, such as progressing in SDG, but also regressing. Poverty, education are still important. I want to invite our participants to writing in the chat a question for our speakers if they have, because we are planning to make a discussion. Now I want to move to the video that Lucie Sauvet has been sent to us to share it with you.
Dear colleagues, I'm happy to join my voice with yours to talk about education as hope. Considering the actual socio-ecological situation, we recognize more than ever the importance of connecting education with action. Most often, in formal education contexts, learning is considered as a step prior to action so as to inform or orient action. But experience shows that learning can also occur through the dynamics of action itself. I've been closely interested in the phenomenon of experiential learning, in particular through environmental citizen movements and mobilizations in which I participated, and also through case studies I conducted with colleagues. In such an informal context, learning is not planned, not intended, but finally it occurs as an important result of immersion in action. In relation with one of the focus of this seminar concerning the shift from traditional learning models towards innovative approaches, I would like to briefly share with you some observations on the types of learning occurring through environmental citizen mobilizations. These observations come from different case studies concerning invasive industrial development projects in various regions of Quebec, Canada, where I live. Most of these mobilizations led to citizen victories, but in any case, they enabled the development of an eco-citizen culture and eco-citizen competence. Finally, we will briefly ask how such informal learning dynamics can inspire formal education practices. Let us begin with some observation about citizen learning. First and globally, as mobilized citizens, we learn in the context of political and economic governance, it is up to us, citizens, to take on the very heavy task of exercising critical vigilance over decisions relating to public affairs, including, of course, the preservation of our living environments, of life itself. Our political decision makers have a certain vision of power in society and too often make decisions under pressure of economic lobbies. Then we understand that it is up to us, the civil society, to bear the burden of proof and self-defense. In particular, we must try to fill the gaps in democracy and reclaim ecological justice. In each and every one of these mobilizations, we learn the fundamental meaning of the word politics. Politics means working together to deal with issues that concern us all. We learn that real politics is a collective affair, that it takes place here, now, and among us, in our kitchen meetings, as well as in collective gatherings and events. We learn to demand real participatory democracy. We practice active democracy. We learn to regain ownership on public affairs and occupy public space. We learn about political structures. We learn about environmental laws and regulations. We learn to claim the legitimacy of our individual and collective role in political decision-making. We learn to ask questions and require valid answers. Socio-ecological issues are complex, so we have to learn together. We need to work together with our complementary expertise and knowledge so as to fully understand and identify appropriate solutions. Not all the necessary knowledge is readily available. We learn to gather information, to consult, investigate, collect field data, to validate information, interpret it, synthesize it, and take a critical step back. We understand the importance of critical discussion and the need for debate. We learn to construct a persuasive argument. We understand that accurate information is the foundation of credibility. It's the fuel of critical thinking. It's the essence of success in debating. Together, we develop a citizen intelligence, an eco-citizen intelligence. We learn the importance of efficient communication. We learn how to interact with elected officials from governments at different levels. We learn to collaborate with environmental organizations. We learn how to work with the media. We learn how to participate in public hearings and, in general, in consultations or interaction activities with government bodies. Through collective action, we get to know better our village, our town, region. We learn to love it more, to develop a sense of belonging, and to dream together. We get to know each other better within the community, to create partnerships. Together we invent or experiment with grounded action strategies. We learn through and about collective commitment. Together, we develop a sense of empowerment and collective effectiveness. This is both the result of our commitment and a driving force to continue. And then we learn that it's not enough to denounce and resist. To resist is to create also. Create to resist the deterioration of our living environments. Create to resist sadness, alienation, individualism. We must clarify a plan for the future. We know what we don't want, but what exactly do we want? So at the heart of citizen mobilization, we learn to propose alternative ways of living and clarify plans for the future. We see that many movements that were initially waged against invasive projects also led to the proposal of alternative paths. Developing such community projects among ourselves are extraordinary contexts for eco-citizen learning, for fostering eco-social justice. But through action, we also learn about all the challenges involved in grassroots work. We learn to recognize activist fatigue. We learn that it's not easy, especially in the long run. We learn not to get discouraged, to pass the flame if necessary. We learn the importance of solidarity, of taking care of each other. Even if we lose in concrete terms, we have gained a political community. We have created alliances that will in any case enable us to carry out other projects and wage other struggles. Returning to formal education, it's important to realize that young people are calling for a committed education that invites them to take part in change. Young people are often referred to as future citizens. However, they are already citizens of their world, their only world. They are whistleblowers, and they have been and remain at the forefront of climate demands. Education must respond to their aspirations and recognize the importance of learning through action, learning together, here, now, by, and among ourselves. Here's their message. We are the generation that grew up with the climate crisis, and we will have to live with it for the rest of our lives. We want to be heard and be part of the change. As educators, we have a responsibility to accompany them, to provide them with spaces for open conversation and reflexive action, and to connect academic knowledge with eco-citizen involvement. This implies opening up schools, colleges, and universities to transdisciplinary approaches and develop a culture of social interaction. Here we can draw inspiration from a wealth of existing research literature on this subject in the field of environmental education and learn from pioneering practices. This would be another chapter, but time has gone. We must indeed respond to the cultural challenge of our education system and construct hope without limits. So I thank you for your attention and above all, for your inspiration and commitment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lucy, for your contribution and for inspiring us. Well, I will now pass to the second round of questions. I think that now the discussion is already reached, also thanks to Lucy's contribution that has been also put in the floor, the terms sustainability, responsibility, credibility, and but also resist and social movements. Now it's time again for John, and I'm happy to ask to John I would like to know something about your organization. So, John, in your organization, by incubating transformative education, you are very committed to flourish people, especially in African youth. How can flourishing and empowering people for imagining a future?
Well, thank you. I think, I've opened with others 9 schools working in the communities on the margins of what we call townships and in rural spaces in South Africa. And we've worked with the assumption that every child can do mathematics and every child can self-liberate. So our pedagogy is a self-liberating pedagogy. No one is going to free you. We have to teach each other to free ourselves. And my journey at LEAP is to take the leap of my own liberation. And it's not an event, it's a lifelong commitment to free myself from false assumptions and to understand the reality in front of me and to adapt, but to adapt with principle and with values that center around common humanity. The inner conditions of flourishing, and what do we need on the inside to call ourselves flourishing? They are not costly. They require relationships. And they're free in a sense, if we all behave as humans seeing each other. So the first one is belonging. I flourish when I am seen and I matter, when my voice is heard and listened to. Belonging is the first of the preconditions. The second is agency. I flourish when I discover I can make a difference in small ways. And I don't have to wait for the future to make that difference. I love the idea that has been articulated in the previous presentation, that we're living in the now, we're not living in the future. Our children must understand it is in the present that agency must be claimed. We don't teach agency. We discover and we unlock agency so that I know I can act, I can shape, and I can lead. Every child deserves to know that. The third one is related to meaning. If I understand that my learning and my actions are interconnected and interdependent, and I understand that I am connected in life, in place, with people, and with common purpose, then I flourish. And finally, I flourish in the word dignity. I am not a deficit. I am not marginalized. I am not previously disadvantaged. I am human. And I have a sense of belonging, a strong sense of agency, a deep sense of meaning. And I demand to be living with dignity. And that can be softened, but there's a great African proverb that says, the child who is carried on the back does not know the length of the journey. We must stop carrying children on our backs, thinking they don't have the capacity. We must free them to work out what the journey entails. The outer conditioning of flourishing, we've got to be activists, not poetic. We've got to create safety. We've got to have a school day that does not humiliate. We've got to create a learning environment that doesn't confuse control with excellence. Because every time a young person is shamed or silenced or labeled, we're not raising standards, we're shrinking the human being. Finally, if flourishing is the goal, then our assessment systems are often the opposite of flourishing. So I want to put a hard question into the room. What are we doing daily that produces despair, even when we call it schooling? Flourishing forces us to redesign what we reward. We must reward curiosity, not compliance. We must reward contribution, not competition. We must reward collective intelligence, not isolated cleverness. We must reward care and courage, not only correctness. When youth flourish, something powerful happens. They stop asking, what is the safest choice? And they start asking, what is the right choice? Hope becomes credible when it is a daily practice of dignity, agency, belonging, and action. Not better policies alone, not more content alone, but we all, as members of the village that is raising the child, create a new culture of learning. The purpose of education is not to prepare children for a world that is breaking. The purpose of education is to prepare children to rebuild the world. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for inspiring us. There are really a lot of things to discuss about flourishing, what does mean flourishing, and how can this process be cultivated in every one of us. Thank you for staying with us. Now I will pass again the words to Lily for another question. Because in the reports that you has been presented highlighted a war international frame. What do this trend means for the role of education in shaping more hopeful future for children And in which direction do you suggest inspiring hope?
Thanks, Maria. Yes, indeed. So I think when looking at where we are in terms of the achievement of the SDGs, it's easy to feel despair. It's easy to feel hopeless because obviously we're not where we want to be, where we envisioned we were going to be in 2015. And as you know, the world has changed significantly since then. Right? We've got, on the one hand, a crisis in human development, but also climate change, which is a child rights crisis. We've also got conflict and geopolitical instability. I think education is absolutely essential for us. It's going to be the next leveler. It is absolutely the bridge to a better future for all. Not just current generations of children, but future generations of children as well. We must invest in education, in our health and nutrition systems, in social protection and child protection systems. These are the building blocks of society, and we cannot afford to underinvest in it. Unfortunately, we know that a lot of this, in a lot of countries around the world, they are not able to spend on that. For example, I think it's 34 countries in Africa alone spend more on external debt payments than they do on health and education annually. So what do we need to do? We need to reform the international financial architecture, which has locked so many of these countries in unsustainable debt. We need to free up this investment and channel it into education, into these building blocks of societies that I mentioned. The second thing is children absolutely need to have a seat at the table in these powerful forums, in decision-making processes. We have seen that they are able, they're willing, and they want to. The 2030 Agenda recognizes children and youth as agents of change, yet they're too often kept at the margins. Decisions are made about their education, for example, that they have no say over, that they have no power. We need to change the paradigm where children are able to are given the tools to become agents of change. And finally, I think it's up for all of us here to speak truth to power. The system isn't working for the majority of us. We need to change the system, and we need to mobilize and galvanize together so that we can all ask collectively for our political leaders to change course and to invest in the things that are needed for future generations.
Thank you, Lily, for your reflection, and I think that your opinion has been put a lot of things in the floor. So thank you, because I think that you has been gone directly to the point. The politics that must be changed. We need to change paradigm, as you say. Well, thank you, Lily. Thank you, John Gilmore. Now I pass the floor to my colleagues, Daniel, which I thank you. For maybe there are some questions from our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Claudia, and thank you to both John and Lily for such a rich contributions, as well as Lucy. Sorry, forgot. That was probably best for me to mention also that to our participants that we would like to obviously bring in Lucy's contribution as well. If there's any questions, we'll have to pass them on to perhaps Lily or John to respond to with all their knowledge. In the meantime, there have been quite a few questions in the chat that have been kind of cataloged in the background. And so I'll read out and then address it probably to one of the speakers, but please feel free between John and Lily to add to and build on one another with your different perspectives. So we'll start with, and please excuse if I do mispronounce your name, Ada Lungu, who said, I design and coordinate non-formal climate education projects and learning experiences relating to sustainable development. After years of working with hundreds of teachers and students, I feel that we educators and facilitators are exhausted and losing hope that we could ever produce a meaningful change in the face of overwhelming odds. Should we embrace that we are soldiers of a lost cause, or are there pragmatic, research-based reasons to look optimistically towards the future? And I would like to direct this towards John, considering your years within the education field.
Well, what a question, and isn't it an example of the responsibility we all have? We have what Pope Francis said about hope. He said the opposite of hope is not despair, it's indifference. Just consider that for a moment. The enemy of hope is indifference. We cannot afford to get tired to the point where we become indifferent. We have to be angry. We have to channel our anger, and we have to live a life of hope. Living a life of hope doesn't mean the battle is not easy. It just means we are better prepared for the battle. We embrace a hopeful mindset and live it as practice to say, what can we do right now with what is in front of us? I think the fatigue comes from the noise. It comes from all the macro noises of politics and despair. And we must hear the voices of children and listen to them and see the hope in their eyes and understand that all we're doing is unlocking that. We cannot make the change. We can unlock the potential of every child by just inviting them to see themselves differently, to belong, and to be agents of change, and then to take risks and actually at times confront the issues that are so difficult to confront. So it's not really a choice. I mean, the opposite of the choice of hope is too unbearable to contemplate. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
And if I could add on to what John said, I think it's true. I mean, I've worked with children from some of the most marginalized and communities and the poorest communities, and I just remember this story of this little boy that I met. It was about 10 years ago, maybe more, who had been taken from his home in Cologne in Germany and forcibly removed to Kosovo, deported basically, without his parents, without his family. He was born in Germany. He was from Kosovo, from the Roma community, could not speak the language when he was arrived there. And so we set up the safe space, the Sunflower House, we called it. It was just a place for these children to congregate, to create stories, to make music. It's just a little safe space for them. And on the wall of that, this boy wrote, without hope, there's no life. And we cannot allow children to feel that level of despair. We must show them that there is a way forward. And it's all of our jobs to do it, right? I mean, everyone in this space has a role to play, whether it's at the global level, speaking at the UN, or at the community, working with grassroots.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, we have to fight the onslaught of scarcity and really talk and use the language of abundance. We've got to practice that. It's we who have to change, the ones who can see a little further than the others can see. We can't be despairing because they're not coming to where we can see fast enough. We must put them on our shoulders so they can see what we can see. Keep them safe as we do that, and then let them lead us. I'm fortunate enough to have worked with young people starting in 2004 in the network of 9 schools we've started. The organization that I started was called the Leap Science and Math School. That organization is now led by young people who were in that first class, who came from communities where they were in safe houses. 6 of our 9 schools have been led by children who were in that group. We just don't know what huge power unlocks when we live with integrity and invitation and constant unlearning, and we ourselves subscribe to a commitment to hope and belief in people around us.
Thank you both to John and Lily. It's truly profound. I think it is a deep question that kind of asks us to look within ourselves. And as you've already said, John, a lot of change in these settings, it comes from looking within yourself to be able to reach out. And it's quite wonderful hearing that, it's the normalization and knowing that it's human to feel not despair, but the opposite of hope, and still knowing you have to hope and look for better. With that, we will progress on to another question. There was quite an interesting one, and I'll ask Lily to respond to this one. It's from Sadiqullah Hassan. How do the ongoing conflicts, such as those in Afghanistan, specifically impact girls' and women's access to education? And what measures can be taken to address these challenges, like the schools and universities are closed in the face of our sisters?
It's a tricky one to answer, and a complex one. What I would say is, there are a lot of areas in which we can work and deliver programs, and where we can do that, we try to. I think a lot of advocacy that we undertake at Save the Children, it's not necessarily direct advocacy, but happens in closed corridors. And we hope in time that we will be able to sort of create the grounds for a better environment for girls and women in the country.
Thank you. And I'm going to bounce off and leapfrog what this question and what you've pretty much brought forward, Lily, is the idea of it's complex situation to deal with. There've been a few questions that kind of underpin the similar question, and I'll round it off with a question from Mohammed F. Keller, where he has asked, please, how can we teach critical thinking and systems thinking be effectively integrated into the formal education? That has bounced off a question that's also just shown up, is that the challenges we face, whether it's climate change, education gaps, or the fight for Indigenous rights, are getting more complex. And I think that kind of is a theme we can discuss, is how are we going to get critical thinking and systems thinking into our educational systems, be that formal education and non-formal education. Lily, maybe you can touch on that first, and then we can go over to John.
Maybe I'll take the question that was on sort of the challenges like climate change, conflict, etc. A lot of these challenges, I think it's for us to recognize that these are global problems, and this trend towards, and for us to realize that this trend towards sort of isolationism is not going to help us anyway. We cannot address these challenges even nationally. It has to be done collectively. There's this whole movement that is starting to talk about things like global sort of common goods, right? So these sort of ideas we should see gaining traction in the future. I will also say, however, that we also have to recognize that a lot of we are working with systems that were designed by very few and the powerful. So I'm talking about the UN specifically, very few and the powerful that aren't equipped to address the challenges today. So what we need is to push for reform of these multilateral institutions, not to abandon them, but to make sure that we are creating a United Nations that's fit for the future and fit for the challenges of our time. I think I'll pass over to John.
Yeah, I think the question is for each of us. What role am I going to play in being a change maker? And I think there is a bottom-up strategy and there's a top-down strategy. And there are some of us who are going to work hard as we get older into the policymaking framework and try to be at the table of leading agencies and groups like UNESCO, United Nations, the Vatican, and so on. But actually, on the ground, we need to work with what's in front of us, and we need to work with the people that we encounter, and we need to know that every conversation matters. So if we can start from that pretext, that we are not called to necessarily be that person who will do the huge stroke of the pen change to policy that will allow for critical thinking to be a key element. I mean, even before critical thinking is in the curriculum, why do we not have a subject called making meaning? Just making meaning. How do we make meaning of our lives? How do we read for meaning? What is meaning? What is purpose? We know that content now sits in the form of a technology base. We don't need more and more curriculum focus areas on content. We need them on preparing for life and preparing for being the young people who will change the world. I want to go back to Afghanistan because I have a very specific answer for that. In the work of No Limits to Hope, we have launched a movement called Education for Hope. And we've centered it around the Global Compact on Education. And that came out of Pope Francis's work. You've heard me quote Pope Francis a couple of times. And if you want to do yourself a favor, just Google him, Pope Francis education, and you'll see what wisdom lies in that life. And one of our pilgrims, because we took a group of non-Catholics to Rome to develop our understanding of education for hope, using this compact for education. Somebody with Marilyn lives in California. She has an online school, a WhatsApp school with children, young women in Afghanistan. And she has developed strategies and practices that allow those children to self-educate. And she has, for example, on some of the website walls, a gallery of their art, which they've taken photographs of using their WhatsApp phones. And they are being provided with questions, and they work as a small group. And they don't go to school, but they go to WhatsApp school. So she has this big heart and vision for this as being a solution that might amplify. And she believes in the multiplier effect, so that each one of these young girls that would have been precluded from even being allowed to go to school becomes subversively an educator. And that's how we have to think. Education is a subversive activity. And when we know that the system is working for compliance, we have to work with a degree of cleverness in that system. And I think there is no other way. If it was easy, it would be done. So even the idea of critical thinking, let's ask ourselves, what is the precursor to critical thinking? It is belonging. So how do we create belonging, and how do we have difficult conversations every day? Because if we have difficult conversations with our students and with each other every day, critical thinking will be produced. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Lily. At this moment in time, I'll encourage from here on, I know I've missed a few of the questions that were in the chat, but I'm going to encourage that we move to more of a raising the hand and unmuting yourself to ask a question, just so it keeps, I'm trying to tie in past questions into the current dialogue, and they're just not quite fitting anymore. We had, excuse me if I do mispronounce your name, we had Giannis who asked if they could ask a question. So the floor is yours. I've asked for you
Thank
to.
you, Daniel. It's a Greek name, Yannis. I'm from Cyprus. And I also happen to be the current president of the International Society for the System Sciences. And I congratulate you for your excellent work. I have a question to both speakers, but also to everybody else. It seems to me and to many people like us that at our level, at the level of practitioners and philosophers and scientists, we have a good understanding that we need more systemic thinking, more empowerment, more participatory methods, giving the power to those whose lives um, are involved to take decisions, like the children, like Lily said, and so on. So we have this understanding, but there is a gap between us and the policymakers. And I have two questions about that. One is, how do we reach the policy level? And the other has to do with us. I mean, your initiative is wonderful, but maybe we need more such initiatives because we are scattered all over the planet, these ideas. And if we had a way to make more alliances between us, it would be a stronger voice or stronger intervention towards those who take decisions. And let me, in parentheses, also inform you about our upcoming conference. I heard a lot of interesting ideas here that would be very good for our 70th conference, which is taking place in June. I put it in the chat. Please check it. If it's something that is interesting for you, join us. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Shall we start with Lily first?
Thanks very much for the question. The level of disconnect I think that you refer to is too prevalent in too many places. And what organizations like Save the Children have been trying to do is to connect local to global levels of decision making. We do that through partnerships with other local organizations, partnerships with children, and to bring these voices to these corridors of power, right? Like the United Nations in New York, to bring children there to dialogue with policymakers. I think it's also really important that we move from a paradigm where, children are seen as one generation locked in this space to kind of opening up more intergenerational dialogue. So I've hosted intergenerational dialogues between sort of policymakers in New York with children to discuss issues such as violence against children and how that affects them, as well as education. It is about connecting these dots and making these connections. Likewise, I think a lot of academic work, so much good work has been done on sustainability, for example, but they stay within those academic areas. And our job is to break these silos, to bring everybody together so that we can start building this sort of movement of hope and movement of how we can work towards a better future.
Yeah, on that matter, I've just put a website connection to the Education for Hope platform that we're busy developing, and I concur entirely with that. We need to work within the construct of a social movement that demands that we do things differently and demands that we humanize education and we humanize the world, and we work for a society where wellness is greater than and more important than profit. Now, that's a huge journey. We can only do it by coalitions. We have to form coalitions of the willing and the able. And we have to be relentless with that. It has to be quite radical. We can't partner in traditional ways where we had MOUs and we discussed who was going to pay for what. We have to find ourselves, in a way, compromising some of our high-handed assumptions about how good we are and how bad the rest are. We have to move past the competition of not-for-profits, past the competition of organizations that build around a central kind of value system, and look for the common humanity, and then find a common language, which hope at the center provides us. Because nobody can fight with us if we say we have committed to an education that will put hope at the center. And hope and love are very close to each other. And I'm not talking about the love of sentiment. I'm talking the love that goes, one hand, the love, and one hand, the justice. So justice without love, as we know, is cruelty. Love without justice is sentiment. We need to understand the love at the center of the hopeful curriculum is the love balanced by the justice. And we've got to do it together. We've got to be absolutely invent ways of creating movement rather than wait for somebody to create the perfect pathway.
And I'd like to add on to John. I think one of the things that we don't hear enough, or that has, been increasingly neglected, is the fact that, for example, the SDGs, we have a common framework, we have a common
Exactly.
it's the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, right? The SDGs are simply the updated version of that. These rights have been recognized by international law, the right to education, the right to survive, the right to learn. All of these are sort of our fundamental human rights. And I think it's time for us to put human rights right back at the forefront of everything that we do.
Right. And go to paradigm shifting language. Let's stop with the incremental stuff. Let's stop saying we must make things slightly better. We must pick up papers. We must do this. We must do that. Let's talk about mindset change and understand and share what are the triggers, what are the things that have affected me, that have shifted my white assumptions in a country where I was part of the oppressing class. What has had to happen inside me? It has been a choice I've had to make to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, but to own the fact that I have been part of the problem. And there isn't anyone in this call who hasn't been part of the problem. So let's not put it out there that the other people are to blame for the mess we're trying to fix. We have to work out how we are actually need to liberate ourselves to be true transformers. And that's a lot. And if we do that together in coalitions, we'll work it out faster.
Thank you. I do notice there's a hand up, Eddie. I've asked you to unmute. You're welcome to take the floor and ask a further question.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been amazing. I apologize for that light. But my question is kind of building off these last points is I think a challenge to coalition building is that while we're trying to build a new reality under new social systems, we are operating under a current set of social systems that don't incentivize and don't ensure safety or sustainability or honestly sometimes survival to actually engage in the work the way that we want to do it. And so, and I've noticed that sometimes that can shut the conversation down. People can't really engage because they don't have time to. They need to engage in the system the way that it's working to get access to what they need. And so, in your work, what have you found as a way to help people around that barrier when it comes to building coalitions or even just believing that we can make these kind of changes when some of the tools that we use to uphold it, like pay for things, doesn't actually align with what we're trying to do?
Relentless invitation, and no judgment, and no ideological high ground. I think the problem with us, the good guys on the other side, is that sometimes we use the tactics of the bad guys on the other side to justify our goodness. And so we, in fact, become we have a polarizing impact. So I think that's the unlearning, is really the invitation is unconditional, but it's an invitation to confront issues. It's not an invitation to be politically correct, but we don't get into the ideological divide. We get into the pragmatic divide of how do we open doors of learning to children, not just for the equity element, but for the complete self-liberation of the child that takes the barrier away, not just helps the child to see across the barrier. And I think, I mean, if it were easy, obviously it would be done. But we have in South Africa some really good examples of social movement, and the social movement of Black consciousness in this country shifted a whole country. And it started with a simple conversation around a table with Steve Biko, Dr. Mambela Rampela, Barney Pachana, and a whole lot of others, just a small group. And they just said, from today, we no longer call ourselves non-white. We will refuse that. How are we participating in the negation of our own identity? So language matters, And we need to develop an invitational language that says, yeah, we don't do that. Yeah, we talk about the future. We talk about children. We talk about liberation ourselves. We talk about intergenerational trauma and what we are doing in this family, if you like, of the social movement to free ourselves. I think, and I know it's like weird coming from an old white guy, but I am self-liberating from my colonial predisposition. It's an oppressive space once you see it. So I'm not here to free others. I mean, I'm busy working on my own freedom, and then I'm useful. While I stick with it as though it matters, I'm not useful. Eddie, thank you for that question, and your smile just connects. And thank you.
Yeah, I would say, just to add to John, is that it's up to us to change. So policymakers respond to incentives. It is up to us to change the incentive structure so that it becomes a policy choice. Inequality, poverty, climate change, these are all policy decisions at the end of the day, to address them or not. It is up to us to change the incentive structure so that it becomes something that is, politically, and we can hold our government's feet to the fire on that.
And that applies at the policy level, but it also applies in the classroom. Because in the classroom, you've got a polarized conversation going on in almost every, not just polarized, multi-rized conversation going on in the classroom. Your job isn't to say who's right and who's wrong. It's to provide alternative thinking. Well, have we thought about that? And what about that? Now, if we don't put alternative choices in front of people who are making policies that are well thought out and are not just criticisms of what exists, but are in fact alternatives that are quite attractive, we've got to get better at that. And I'm really intent on trying. I'm a bit older, so I haven't got as much time to do this thing. So I'm getting a bit urgent, to say, I must know what the alternative is before I criticize the obvious weakness of the existing framework or system.
I'm just going to offer Eddie one last moment to maybe speak back on that.
Eddie, bring that face back.
Well, one, I just want to say thank you. Just thank you. That's extremely helpful. And it's a big part of the task, I think, is making, I don't know, it just feels so practical, the idea of embracing, trying to do things in a way that make the world better. Like it just feels like the most practical thing we can do. And so thank you so much. I don't want to take a lot of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Right now, we will conclude our questions, and I'll pass it back to Maria Claudia, who's going to just give us some insights from the WEEC's perspective.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you all the participants this webinar. We just want to move this discussion in another platform. We noticed that this discussion was very rich and fruitful, so thank you all for your contribution. I really quick want to show you our platform, the forum of No Limits to Hope. Here you are. Daniel, please, can you confirm that can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So I will put in the chat the link of our of the website. And here, if you go in No Limits to Hope, that let's remember that is initiative from WEEC Network, Club de Rome, and the Fifth Elements. You have the landing page here, you can see, and there is also the concept note which inspired this conversation. So please have a look at the concept note, and then we invite you all to continue this discussion about the themes that we have today. We have been arising in the forums. Here you are. So Here there is a description, and we invite you to submit your contribution, your reflection in this forum. Here you can see some contribution. I can see some people that has been already send their contribution that are now with us in this webinar, and I want to thank you all them, and also thanks to all people that will send their contribution and their reflection about No Limits to Hope. If you go down in this page, you have the possibility to join the forum. It's something very simple, just 1,000 words. Just you will need to fill out this very brief form, adding your name, surname, and email, and the text that for your reflection about No Limits to Hope. So I invite all of you to submit your contribution regarding No Limits to Hope, as I saw that in the chat there is a very fruitful insight. So please let's continue in our forum. And the second thing that I want to show with you is inviting to attend the next World Environmental Education Congress that we as WEEC Network, we are co-organizing in Perth, in Australia, as Mario Salomone was saying before. The call for abstract now is open, so please read it. And here you have the flyer. I will put everything in the chat right now. Here you are. I will put also the link for the Congress. In the Congress will be presented the report of No Limits to Hope. So we warmly invite you to submit an abstract and to join us. And now I give back the floor to Daniel. Thank you for moderating this session. Thank you for all the staff that has been worked for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Claudia. What I'll do first is obviously just give my gratitude to our speakers, those who attended today with us. Jack and Lily, thank you very much. For Lucy, who gave us a video contribution, and to Jack, who in the background prepared for this webinar, but again, unfortunately had to not attend due to family medical situation. I will keep my wrap up short and sweet. There were a few key words that I noted during this, and I've kind of merged it into one kind of sentiment: is let's choose hope, live hope, create agency and action, and do that through communal cultivation in each and every one of us. I thank you all for being in this webinar today. If you have any questions or would like to reach out, please do so via my email, which would have come with the invite to this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a blessed weekend, everyone. Thank you.